and light, love, abundance, and wealth. True talk from true thoughts. Hope you all been out there wising up and rising up. Today is Monday, July the 27th, 2026. I'm about to go to the gym, even though it's still early in the day and early for me this summer, 8 p.m. I normally like to go to the gym at about 1 or 2 in the morning, and I'll stay until about 5 a.m. That's when people start to trickle in. The machines start to get occupied, and everywhere you go, you're bumping into somebody. Of course, there's some beautiful women at the gym, but that's not the place to be meeting a mate. Anyway, I'm going to let the room fill up, but what this live is about today is stretching. And I want to emphasize that stretching, of course, is important, is essential, but it is not an option. Stretching is a must. Gotta stretch. And as a matter of fact, I'm just gonna get straight into it because, I gotta take my shower. I gotta get my coffee ready. Yes, I do drink coffee every now and then. But what triggered this topic, what triggered this video was, for the first time in a long time, I was on Instagram and I was looking at this post. It was relatively funny. It was about how once you get over 30, once you get over 40, how instead of just going out there playing basketball or flag football or soccer or going to the gym, you have to all of a sudden start to stretch. When you're younger, a lot of times you don't stretch before you get into physical activity. And that's seen as you just being young. You don't need to stretch. You can just go out there and you can play, right? So I was looking at this post on Instagram and it was saying, or should I say it was asking, when did you realize that you couldn't just get up and go out there and do physical work, physical activity, be it basketball, football, running track, lifting weights, doing calisthenics? When did you realize that you weren't as young as you remember or as young as you thought? This is what the post was about. And I climbed through the comments and I wanted to see if I can find anybody that was rational minded, that had the understanding of the importance of stretching. And I didn't find any comments to where people were speaking about the importance of stretching. They were all just laughing like, yeah, man, once I turned 30, man, I had to stretch for like 20, 30 minutes before I went to go play basketball. Or once I turned 40, I had to stretch for 15 to an hour before I went out there and started to play. Here's the thing about stretching, man. You don't start the need to stretch because you're over 30, right? You don't start needing to stretch because you're over 40, because you're over 50. You don't start needing to stretch because you're not quote unquote young anymore. You always needed to stretch. And the reason why a lot of us need to stretch so much now that we're 30 or 40 or 50 is because we never really stretched before. you know, we got this habit of relying on youth. We got this habit of relying on talent instead of relying on knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Real knowledge, wisdom, and understanding lets us know that from the time that you're young, you need to be stretching. That's why when you go to a place like Japan, and I lived in Japan for 4 years via the military, they are always squatting. Even when they're waiting for the bus, they're waiting for the train, whatever it may be, they're squatting. They do this throughout the world. You got people that's doing mobility stretches. They're doing flexibility stretches. They're stretching their muscles while they're simply waiting for the bus. You know, but here in the United States of America, a lot of times, a lot of us stretch. We only stretch a lot of times when we're forced to stretch, right? I.e., once we get quote unquote old or when we are yawning, right? So here's the thing. Had we been stretching all of our lives, right? Had that been a part of our daily life from the time we were young till the time we got over 30, over 40, over 50, etc., then we wouldn't feel old before we wouldn't feel old before we went out there to play basketball or football or whatever it might be, right? So the whole point of this short live is that you don't start needing to stretch because you're old. You start needing to stretch more and more and more, and you start to crick and pop and snap and all that stuff because you've been going 20, 30, 40 years without really stretching. So we uplift the notion that because you're young, you don't really need to stretch, but that's ignorance. And we suffer from that lack of understanding and knowledge. And then once we get 30, we blame it on old age. But really, it was lack of knowledge. It was lack of knowledge and lack of understanding that makes it hard for us to work out. And you all understand what I'm saying. I'm giving you all a little short backstory to this as well. Over 10, almost 15 years ago, I did some online dating because I was traveling a lot. And I like to, meet something before I arrive in the city that I'm going to. And I was talking to this, she was Caucasian. And I haven't talked to many Caucasian chicks. But she was deep into the Indian culture. When I say Indian, I mean of India and Asia. And she was telling me that, if you work out for an hour, then stretching for 5 minutes before the workout and 5 minutes after, that's not enough. You need to be stretching at least 15 to 30 minutes, regardless of whether or not you're young or in shape or any of that, because there's an accumulation over the years of your body contracting versus expanding. You see, when we work out, we are contracting our bodies. And when we start to stretch, be it mobility, be it flexibility, be it stretching the muscles, that's when we expand our body again. So a lot of us, we wind up with slouched backs. We wind up with, aching joints and bones and muscles and torn tissues because we don't understand the importance of stretching out. Don't get me wrong, people have heard that it's important to stretch, yet and still they will only stretch for about 5 or even 10 minutes before they work out. And then they'll do 5 or 10 minutes after they work out. And that's cool, but it's not enough. There are certain stretches that people around the world just do every day, We talk about rest days. A lot of them rest days should be dedicated to stretching. I'll repeat that. A lot of our rest days should be dedicated to stretching. So this is why when you look at yoga is very important to getting the body strong. A lot of us, we look towards calisthenics and weightlifting, but really, if you get into yoga, your body will be just as strong because with yoga, you're just simply building the body up rather than breaking it down so it can be built back up. And here's another thing. You got yoga, then you got calisthenics, then you got gymnastics. Yoga is calisthenics and gymnastics in the form of poses, in the form of isometric holds, right? And then you go from yoga to calisthenics. Calisthenics is yoga in movement. And then gymnastics is yoga and calisthenics in the most graceful of movements. You go from just doing yoga poses and isometric holds, hanging on the bar, to doing pull-ups. And then you go from pull-ups to doing muscle-ups. And then you go from muscle-ups to doing gymnastic work on the bars. So yeah, I want to point that out. But regardless if you're doing any of those activities, or if you are doing weightlifting, or you are playing flag football as an older gentleman, or if you're playing soccer and doing CrossFit as in quote unquote older woman, stretching is highly essential. It's not pretty and it's not glamorous, to show it on the internet. I mean, unless you're a woman in some tight clothes and stuff like that. People love watching them videos. But people, we attribute the need for stretching to being old. And it's not because you're old that you need to stretch. You need to stretch because throughout the years, you never truly stretched. You never dedicated as much time to stretching as you did to playing. You never dedicated as much time to stretching as you did to working out. You never dedicated as much time to stretching. You never seen, we never truly saw the correlation between stretching and youth. So I've seen videos of, I remember this one older gentleman, he's very into ancient Kemet. And, as he was getting older, he started realizing he couldn't move and stretch like he used to. Excuse me, he realized he couldn't move like he used to. And that's not because of old age. It's because we have not been stretching. So on rest days, one thing that I like to implement is isometric holds, yoga, mobility and flexibility stretching, on resistance bands, and this is especially true with weightlifters. A lot of weightlifters don't see the importance of resistance bands or isometric holds. It's like everything has to be, heavy and have a lot of weights to it. Let me look at some of these comments. I have no idea. This is why I really don't be reading comments. So if you got to this video while it wasn't live, I just get a lot of silly comments on live videos. But yeah, this is what this video is about. Is pointing out the fact that stretching and yoga. When I say yoga is really a whole system. So it's not just stretching. But for the sake of this video, stretching, yoga, it correlates with the fountain of youth. And as long as you are getting your stretches in, like truly stretching, you'll be functional, right? We talk about functional strength with calisthenics and being able to move and move gracefully. That's one of the definitions of calisthenics. You got Cali, which means beauty, and then you got sthenics, which means strength. And together it means being able to move functionally and gracefully in a beautiful way. That's what it means. But when we don't stretch and we don't see and understand and know the importance of stretching, over time our back starts to hunch. We start to shrink. That's another thing. We start to shrink. We also start to, our muscles don't heal as much because we haven't stretched them as much as we have compacted our muscles, and our bones start to take on a brunt of our heavy exercises versus our muscles, right? So if I'm not mistaken, the muscles move the bones and whatnot. So yeah, man, I just wanted to come in. I wanted to speak on this. It is very overshadowed and very overlooked. Stretching is very overshadowed and overlooked by youth, by exercising and, glamorous workouts. But make sure you're stretching. Make sure you're stretching. Make sure you're getting your water intake. Because these are the things that if you don't do them, you'll get injured from not doing these things. And you'll wake up hurting, sore, and aching. This is what keeps the fountain of youth. So if we saw stretching as something we should do our entire lives versus once we get old, then we would always feel flexible. We would always feel agile. We would always feel functional. And we wouldn't feel sore. We wouldn't feel hurt. We wouldn't feel damaged. We wouldn't feel like our posture is messed up. And that's another thing, when you're dealing with yoga, You want to do some posture holds, especially in this day and time where everybody is leaning over looking at their phone. Lift your phone up because your posture is everything. Huh? Your posture is everything. So some of the things I like to do are calf lift holds. I like to do wall sit holds. I like to do plank holds. And believe it or not, just standing still and straight. Like when you're in boot camp or when you're in the ranks of the military and you're doing the marching and everything, that contributes to good posture. That contributes to good strength on your joints, your tendons, your ligaments, all of that. So last thing I want to say is, man, never place your muscles above your organs, above your tendons and your limbs and your joints. you know don't place your building muscle above that, because truth be told, you can't build muscles without them things being stable. So yeah, man, I was looking at that post on Instagram and they were laughing. And the question was, when did you realize that you couldn't just get up and play like you did when you were a kid? Because now that you're over 30 or 40 or 50 and whatnot, your bones are sore and aching and you need to stretch in order to be warmed up to play. And I'll reiterate it one more time. You know, you don't feel unable to work out without stretching because you're old. You feel unable to work out without stretching because throughout the years we have not been stretching enough. So yeah, I'm finna get ready to go to the gym. Forget this coffee brewing. Finna take a shower. Yes, I am finna take a shower before I go to the gym. Because some people be funky as hell in the gym. And I'm gonna stretch here in my room. And then I'm gonna stretch once I get to the gym. I'm gonna use the little stretch equipment that they got, be it resistance bands or the stretch section that they got. And I'm gonna do also my mobility stretches as well. So as you get older, it's not age that prevents you from being able to bend down and touch your toes. It's not age that prevents you from being able to, you know, hold your leg, the heel of your foot to your buttocks with both hands. It's not that that's stopping you from being flexible. It's the fact that we're moving every day. And then on top of that, we are working out, but we're not stretching enough. So yeah, man, I just found that very, very interesting, man. Lack of understanding, lack of knowledge, and we think we're getting old because we're a certain age. We attribute all that to age. Oh man, when you get this age, you ain't gonna be able to do this, you ain't gonna be able to do that. Well, if you are doing what you need to be doing throughout the years before you reach that age, and even once you reach that age, you start to correct your habits by doing what needs to be done, you will be functional until old age. It's the reason why the farmer is still functional. The agriculturalist is still functional. The gardener even is still functional, right? Despite the fact that they're 40, 50, 60 years old. So like Aaliyah said, age ain't nothing but a number. And no matter what age you are, knowledge is supreme, reigns supreme. Understanding reigns supreme. Wisdom reigns wanes. Wisdom reigns supreme. Wholeness and light, man. Wholeness and light. Peace.